interested in asking a question of
Good,
any
if
of
you
the?
could, yeah, very good. Is that the microphone, if you could stand next to the camera, because we are recording and we want to get your question where everybody can understand it. And I got to turn it on right now, so please don't speak until I turn it on. And let me see.
And I'm just reminding the participants who are here by Zoom that the plan is to let people who are there in person at the event ask the questions first. Go ahead, John.
Okay, it is on now, and so, well, yeah, that's that camera. So go ahead and speak, sir.
I've been thinking about the potential for electronic manipulation, and I see two vectors of potential problems. One is that the files that result from a specific election get swapped with another set of files. So how does the system track a particular set of files and maintain integrity through the process? And a related question, I understand that it could be possible for ballot images to be altered electronically. And so how do you keep file integrity? Do you have checksums or what?
Yeah, so those are really good questions. I get to hold two titles. I got dual citizenship. The first time I met John was when I was doing fraction magic, and I don't know if everybody's aware of fraction magic.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm the creator of that. And while I was working, it was Mimi Kennedy. I hope she's on. Hey, Mimi, if she is. We were all at Mimi Kennedy's house. It was me, the great Bev Harris, Mimi Kennedy, and John Brakey. And I just met you that night, right, John?
That's right.
And John the whole night was like, "What can you do with the images, though? What can you do with ballot images?" And I was like, "Man, I can't do nothing with those images. I'm not touching those. I can't get at an image the way that I'm wanting to manipulate this program, because, like we saw with John Doe or Jane Doe Lasso, if you get a little bit of the piece, what's 0.6 of an image, you still voted for me. I mean, if I fill in 0.6 of a bubble, I still voted for you. So the intent is obvious there. And also, when so I'm on the end of being this criminal who's stealing an election, and now I'm on the other end of being the person that's giving you a way of protecting yourself against that. When John initially wanted to build this program, I told him no. And the reason why I did is I said, because we were looking at that time at assembling the images in code. And I was like, I write code, man. I don't like confidence. I need evidence. I write code. And I wouldn't touch them because we were basically reordering the images. So you are correct. You do have the ability to mess with an image. However, doing it on a mass scale that would change an outcome of an election, I think is a little bit more far-fetched in the sense that just try to open a PDF file. Just try to open a lot of them on a computer. It's going to crash your computer. It's not going to happen. You're not going to be able to open a computer. So unless somebody's borrowing a server or a satellite from Amazon to do this, that should be unlikely to happen. However, what we are proposing, and this is what me, John, and the great Dr. Bennett are talking about. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago, in fact, was that we wanted to release this with the election officials, and they should be hashed. The files are automatically hashed, but we would create our own hash, and the official record comes from the Secretary of State or some entity where, let's say, I want to game the system, and I play around with a few images and play around with the Excel file. The high bar that Senator Bennett is talking about, I got to remember to call you Senator, I can't call you Ken now. Senator Bennett was talking about was that high bar. So now you got to bring that, and it's got to be evidentiary. So we should be able to take everything you did and replicate it, but we're not going to use what you give us. We're going to go back to the state, the Secretary of State. We're going to download the cast vote record. We're going to download Abe because they'll have their version there for download. And we're going to download the images. And you better be right, because we're going to have the authentic verifier to do or repeat what you've done. So I hope that covers it. A checksum is good, but a hash being housed with the Secretary of State is the state record. So if you get their records, then we got a problem. But ideally, having it at the Secretary of State should be more than enough.
And if I could add one thing to that.
Wait, excuse me, Benny, you are coming in echoing. You're coming in on Zoom and in person.
No, probably got two mics closed.
Yes, so just for future, so that we could understand you, but it needs to be clear.
There's been a lot of papers written. He was in a room one time that they said, yeah, we could take the image and we can do this or that and we can change it. Well, Mr. Grifter, have you ever heard of being tarred and feathered? The county has the original ballot. The original ballot is married to a ballot image which is hashed. Who are you fooling? You're going to get in real big trouble. That's fraud. You changed an image in order to get an outcome. These are other things that people throw up as a reason not to get it. And why? You know, when I first got involved in elections 20 years ago, I was tracking a guy named R. Doug Lewis. Ever heard those names? He's the guy who started the Association of Secretary of States. He was in the basement of the White House with Karl Rove, okay, back when Nixon was there, okay? And he started the voting center. And he was paid by the vendors to organize in order to get these machineries out. And you know what this guy taught? He taught elections people that a good elections administrator is an administrator who knows how to hide all the warts. Now, if I was a father and I was teaching my kids that, what am I raising? Sociopaths? That is how elections sometimes can be a problem, because they have a problem. What do you want? Speed or do you want accuracy? We need to give them both now. And that's what Abe does. Honest Abe has produced a system that makes elections transparent, trackable, publicly verified, without the images, the cast vote records, a spreadsheet. What do you want it to be? How do you prove it?
John, maybe I could,
Please
John,
do.
if I could offer my
my
answer to the gentleman's question, which I think is good. And I'm not a computer expert, but I think I'm aware of a couple of words that were used, and those were hashes and checksums. And I think a person would be taking a big risk if they changed an image or changed part of that cast vote record spreadsheet for the other reason that occurs to me, and that is there might be 10 or 15 other organizations that have the data that could run it. And when I was Secretary of State, I also oversaw the Library and Archives Agency of the state of Arizona. And after trying to figure out how to keep records safe and with integrity, they came up with the acronym LOCKS. Lots of copies keep stuff safe. LOCKS with 2 S's. And so if ABC and CNN and MSNBC and Fox and the Republican state party and the Democrat state party and the 6 county parties and 5, if everybody's got the original data that's been hashed and checksummed, and 14 of the 15 people verifying those election results are doing just that, coming up with an accurate verification, and one lone somebody who's playing with images, if they can, without, and I think that would change the hash and the checksum, and then the same with the spreadsheet. Somebody is going to be taking a huge risk to try to manipulate something when 14 other people are doing it straight up and verifying the results that the county came up with in the first place. But I would be very open to people much smarter than me to give me the answers to your own question, sir, as to how do we make sure that images of the ballot images and or the cast vote record are not manipulated.
And we have the paper ballots, Senator Bennett, to go fall
As
back
John
on.
mentioned, I didn't mention that because John already mentioned that if it finally comes down to a question of whether this person's opinion of what this ballot image really says is different than the other 14 groups that ran a verification, the ultimate backup is you go to the county and you tell them we need image number 692. Okay, it's in box 13. And pull it out and look at it.
Just stand next to the mic, please.
Yeah. After hearing your answers, it occurred to me that the only place that mischief could be done is within the SOS office itself. And given that we're dealing with deep state activities, in which the deep state is highly oriented towards one party, that tells me that there is room for manipulation within the government of these files.
But can't answer.
The source files are going to be in the 15 counties. And so once those files get to the SOS, if there's some manipulation there, then we can always go back to the original source files in each county. And then, as noted earlier, the ultimate source file is the paper ballots that have to match or I think will
Great
match.
answer, Senator. Thank you.
Ken, if you could talk about the freezing of the rolls and there are other parts of this process and the use of time that enshrines the records. If you just talk about the other parts of your bill that, we're going to freeze the rolls, we're going to have
The bill involves 4 pieces of data being released to verify the election. The first 2 are already public information, and I skipped over those and I probably shouldn't have. But the first 2 pieces of information are already public information. The one is in Arizona, we cut off voter registrations 29 days before an election, and that kind of frozen voter domain are the voters that are eligible to participate in that election 28 days later. Now we start early voting 27 days before the election. So, the process begins almost immediately, but and one of the reasons we cut off on the 29th day is so that we have a fixed domain of these voters. And so again, if a county has 100,000 voters that are certified as eligible to vote in the election on the 29-day cutoff, and then over the next 27 days, 80,000 of those, that's the second piece of data. The first is the list of the 100,000 voters. Some voters can have their names and address redacted. Victims of domestic violence, law enforcement personnel, judges, there might be 1 or 2 others. But for example, in Maricopa County, out of 2.6 million registered voters, there's about 6,000 redacted voter names and addresses. So it's not a large percentage, but generally speaking, the 4 pieces of data are when the 29-day cutoff occurs, we have a fixed domain of voters eligible to vote in that election. The second piece of data that's released is of those eligible voters, how many voted in the election? That's already public information. It's in your voter file that you voted or you didn't vote in a given election. We don't keep track of how you voted, of course, but whether a person voted, that's the yes that gets recorded by the county recorder that you participated by, you cast a ballot in this election. We don't keep track of what was on your ballot, but that's how the candidates already get the files that says, here are the voters who have voted in 4 of the last 4 elections or 3 of the last 4. So there's a yes or no by the name of each voter in each election as to whether they've participated in that election. So the first data is which voters were eligible. The second is which voters voted. That now gives you the number of how many ballot images you should have. If you had 100,000 voters eligible, 80,000 voted, you should have 80,000 ballot images and the cast vote record on which the votes from those 80,000 ballots were added up. Those are the four pieces of data that are in Senate Bill 1653. I see a hand from Jan.
Thank you, Ken. I want to thank you for sticking with this since last year when we spent some really good quality time working on it. And I can't wait to be able to get the Arizona bill introduced in the Michigan legislature. I already have some people lined up. What I wanted to ask about, and this is really going to the heart of the distrust problem. If you look at the book by a fellow named McLean, a professor at the University of Kentucky, who wrote a very good book on called "Deliver the Vote: A History of American Election Fraud." Many of the problems that he identifies from 1800 on were really paper ballot shenanigans, stuffing ballot boxes, that kind of thing. These were patterns. And that's really what a lot of the steal the vote people think about. They don't understand computers and all of these other issues, but they accuse Georgia election workers of bringing in, suitcases of extra ballots and that kind of thing. Now, as an election administrator myself, retired, I know how hard that would have been to do, but they don't know that. So I thought about the presidential election of 2016 in Michigan, where I coordinated the people who were monitoring the recount that Jill Stein paid for, where we were going through precinct after precinct in Michigan's largest county. And one of the things that became very clear, which we could not do anything about in this recount, because all you were doing was getting a count for the 6 people who were running for president. But what we saw was a very worrisome pattern where we had, when we went to the absentee ballot precincts, there were ballot after ballot that was totally blank. And statewide, there was a record number of blank ballots. There were 17,000 ballots that were just totally blank. Now, people don't spend $1 plus to send in a blank absentee ballot. They just don't do that. So what was going on there? We never were allowed to find out. Finding patterns like this, I would love to be able to do it. And I'm wondering, not necessarily in the legislation, but in future plans or Bennie's very wonderful mind, is there a way that we can look for patterns? Because this would be a very important pattern to look for. Absentee ballots that are totally blank. That suggests, I'm sorry to say, some shenanigans in the back room. That's part of what the steal the vote people are really worried about, along with some other fantasy stuff. But this is the kind of thing we need to address to get full trust.
My response would be that if a person has the ballot images and the cast vote record, and those are organized so that the one backs up the other and vice versa, you would, with some fairly rudimentary, probably beyond my own, but fairly rudimentary spreadsheet skills, be able to look and see if those kinds of patterns. I mean, one of the patterns we looked for in the audit was, were there any batches of ballots where people there were only votes for Biden and no votes for Trump, or vice versa? And one of the things that the cyber ninjas that John mentioned identified was that there were a few batches that were one way or the other, and if those batches had come from voting centers where multiple people, people were, or especially for mail-in ballots, if mail-in ballots ever produced a batch that was all for one or all for the other, that would be a big red flag that some manipulation may be trying to be accomplished behind the scenes. You could have some precincts in certain parts of almost any state and certain parts of almost any big city where, the voter registration is such that you might get all Trump ballots from some precinct in Scottsdale. You might get all Biden ballots from some precinct in South Phoenix. But with the combination of the ballot images and the cast vote record, you would be able to really get into looking at those kinds of patterns and possible manipulations.
Well, I'm looking forward to having that because I'm working with people in Detroit who have long suffered from some very suspicious stuff, and mainly not because Detroit is a corrupt city, but because there was so much money at stake in a lot of elections, huge bond issues, big contracts, really too tantalizing to not have some corruption. And a lot of people since 2009 have had me come in and train people to look for this stuff. And we have found some really crazy evidence of plain old fashioned cheating.
And Jan, Abe will let you sort. Abe, just so you know,
yeah.
The program that Bennie demonstrated would allow you to find those patterns. You could sort by blank ballots.
That would
You
be
can
great.
sort. Yep. And so this is going to let people sort by precinct, by race, by contest, by undervote, by overvote. So it's
that's going to be a huge help.
The other thing I would mention is, and this also I think helps to address ballot image manipulation, maybe other races that aren't as high profile, but are on every ballot. For example, in the 2020 election in Arizona, Trump lost to Biden by about 10,500 votes. The Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court got 200,000 votes more than either one of the presidential candidates. A legalization of recreational marijuana question that was on the ballot that year got almost 300,000 more votes than either one of the presidential candidates. So there's some correlations I think that could be made with the ballot images and the sorting power of the cast vote record and the tool that Bennie has shown, where if people are, only going to manipulate one race, frankly, I think, there's a lot of people that said, oh, well, the 2022 election in Arizona was evidence of fraud because Kari Lake couldn't have lost the governor's race. Well, I believe Kari Lake lost the governor's race by a hair, just like Donald Trump lost the presidential race by a hair 2 years earlier. There were other statewide Republican candidates on the ballot. The Republican woman state treasurer running for state treasurer got 120,000 more votes for state treasurer than Republican Kari Lake got for governor. Mark Fincham, who ran for Secretary of State and claims that his race was stolen. There's clear patterns that show that he just did not appeal to voters like Kimberly Yee, the Republican woman running for state treasurer. She got 200,000 more votes for state treasurer than Mark Fincham got for a race above her on the ballot. Lower races should always have a drop off, and yet, so there's all kinds of patterns that also come in from other races on the ballots that are embedded in the ballot images and the cast vote record. Josh, you've had a hand up for a while.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank you and everybody for the presentations. I think tools of this sort can be very valuable for detecting inadvertent errors of various kinds, especially errors that are being sought by election officials as they're going through the process. But I think there are some concerns that need to be addressed, and I'd like to ask for you or others to address these concerns, and especially in cases where there are, I believe, better tools that can accomplish all the important things that you're trying to accomplish here, and perhaps even more. The first gap is what was raised by the first questioner, and I think he's absolutely right here, that as an individual trying to look at the record and use this tool, I have no way of knowing that the ballot images match the actual ballots. Checksums, cryptographic hashes just don't do that. If there's an inadvertent error, sure, but if there's a malicious intent at the back end, at the origin, I have no way of knowing that these ballot images actually match the actual cast vote records. So I'd like to get your sense.
Can I address that point? Can I address that point, Josh?
Please.
John and Benny and I have spoken quite a bit about the fact that what we would really, the ultimate link that kind of closes the loop, or you called it a gap, and that's a good word, is if we gave either candidates or county or state parties the ability to ask for, at random, 25 or 50 or 100 actual paper ballots to be pulled by each county on a random basis, so that those could then be used to verify that and I don't, it wouldn't take many paper ballots matched with the ballot image in Greenlee County, where they have 8,000 ballots in an election. Wouldn't take but probably 20, and you could get a statistical valid sample. Now in Maricopa with 2 million, maybe it's 200 or maybe it's 2,000 or whatever. But I would love to see something along the lines of a random verification of paper ballots to ballot images on a county by county basis.
So I think what you're suggesting is an audit of the correspondence between the ballot images and the paper. And that certainly can be done and makes sense. But if you're going to do that, you can skip a step and go straight to matching the paper against the results. You don't need to go through the ballot images. You can do an audit of the paper against the results. And there are methods for doing that, risk limiting audits or a popular method. And you're going to get better results and more accuracy if you go directly to that endpoint. So that's the first concern. Okay. The second concern is, and I think you were mentioning this a little bit earlier, that people will have concerns and the last questioner also mentioned this, that the actual chain of custody of the original ballot paper may not have been maintained accurately. Again, I have no way of knowing that. If I'm suspicious, I'm using a tool like this. I don't know that the actual ballot papers have been preserved and matched properly.
And Senator Bennett, this is Susan Pinchon. Would you mind if I just, in 3 or 4 sentences, just because I've given so much thought to this. Hi, Josh. Okay. Hi. So, first of all, there's also chain of custody issues in risk limiting audits for the paper ballots.
Absolutely.
And so far, risk limiting audits around the country are only looking at 1 or 2 races. So nobody's trying to deny the existence of other types of audits or to say that this is the only way that we can verify our elections. What this does is, when you put the paper ballot through the tabulator, assuming that there's not, insider manipulation. It's sealing the accuracy then of the paper ballot. Now that paper ballot can't be tampered with after the election and before risk limiting audit, because now they're matched together. So but the purpose of this AIB program is to let people sit in their own homes and feel comfortable, people who are doubting what's going on in our country. And we can continue to work on other types of audits, but we have to make these systems more transparent. Thank you.
And thank you, Susan. And I'm very, very much a supporter of greater transparency. And I think that's absolutely the right thing to do. I'm concerned about the risks of false confidence when we're saying to voters, yes, you can sit in your own home and verify the ballot images match the tally, but the other two gaps I mentioned might mean that they don't match the actual votes
Okay.
cast by voters.
But Josh, think about what we're asking them to do now. We're asking them to trust the results without any kind of checking. So at least this is one step of checking towards verification. And again, it doesn't negate other types of auditing, but this is an additional method to give people confidence. And what's the alternative? To just have the results and say, trust those.
Well, in terms of the alternatives, I think you would probably know where I would go with that, which is end-to-end verifiability, which is a technique which allows voters to check for themselves that their votes have been accurately counted without having to trust paper records, without having to trust anything else. They can check all the way down to the end without compromising privacy. And the privacy, actually, that's the third gap, and that's my final concern here, because I know I heard what John said at the beginning of this discussion, but it certainly is the case that publication of ballot images, or even publication of the set of CVRs, can compromise voter privacy. And I'd be happy to talk more about how that can happen. I don't want to monopolize here, but it's certainly the case that just publishing this can enable coercion, can enable vote selling in ways that were not possible before. So I'm concerned about that.
And I want to talk with you in the next few days so that you can help me make this idea better.
Sure.
But I want to work towards making the idea better, not identifying reasons why it can't be done.
Okay, that seems
that's
very
fair
good.
enough. That's fair enough.
That's very fair. I'd be delighted to talk further. Phone, email, whatever. I can give you lots of pointers to information, but it's easier to talk directly. So I'm happy to do it. Thank you.
And
by the way, that phone number was my grandparents' original phone number. My grandparents' original phone number in Prescott, where I live, was 49. They got it in the 1920s. The first 100 phones were passed out, and the Beulah checks got 49. And over the years, Mountain Bell, Ma Bell, and everybody added digits to it, and it's now that 928-445-2949.
Still ends in
when Grandma died about 12 years ago, I bought that number because I always wanted that 49 number to be in the family. So, Justin, you have a hand.
Thank you, Senator Bennett. I appreciate all of your steadfastness through everything here. It's been a wild ride. I just following you guys, and I'm sure you felt it even more. But to follow through and see if I can address, summarize what I've been hearing and everybody saying as well, is the images help over the cast vote record because when margins are very close, people have questions not just about whether there's alignment, but whether what people actually marked, especially on hand-marked paper ballots, is actually picked up by the machine correctly.
Correct.
You can verify that visually where you can't with a spreadsheet.
Correct.
So that's part one. Part two, about the question about sorting. I do find it kind of interesting that if we wanted to say filter out overvotes or filter out undervotes or filter out patterns of various kinds, it does raise the question of, all right, now how do I find those ballots out of the paper stack? Are they labeled in some way with like a unique identifier number or something like that?
Find the
And
actual
then-
paper ballots. Find the actual paper ballots.
Right. So if I just said I have a set of undervotes, all right, well, I know how many there are and I know how many images match, but how can I actually go find that in the paper record?
And Justin, forgive me, this is Susan Pinchon, just quickly again. This whole thing with paper with ballot images, if all these great people who are putting a lot of energy into some other types of auditing would turn their attention to ballot images, because one of the things that these systems are capable of doing is putting a identifier on each ballot, not to identify the voter. Once the paper ballot, the anonymous paper ballot goes through the machine, and it marks the same number on the paper ballot and the ballot image, so that you're sure when you go back to the paper. So this is still a work in progress. And you know, as far as we've gotten, and I think Abe, our new audit tool, helps a lot, but it will get better and better and better as lots of brilliant minds put their minds to this.
Sure.
I think there's going to be a lot of people who want to verify that.
And people will say that will open up vote selling, but we have to remember that is also very able to be done with vote by mail. And there really a number of states have laws prohibiting voters from marking their ballots, and that really needs to be done, because people will accuse them of ballot images making it easier for people to sell their votes. Although, because vote by mail is so easy, like in Arizona, you can take a picture of your ballot and text it to your vote buyer or have them sit at your kitchen table. And so it's really not fair to blame like that on ballot images, but it would be a good idea to tell people they're not allowed to mark their ballots.
Well, I can understand on a systemic sense. And so that's where I'd love to have the offline discussion with some folks about this. But the last layer that I wanted to bring up, so that I'm covering the bases, is the chain of custody that we talked about. This is something where I understand blockchain systems are really good at. That you can, from your postal service through the people who received it, et cetera, you're separating the ballot from the envelope, right? So it is still anonymized, but you're tracking the steps that it went through, so you can actually ensure that it wasn't manipulated.
And chain of custody is a big issue. And if there's things we can do to improve that, we passed a bill out of the Senate today, bipartisan, requiring the counties to maintain a chain of custody on every piece of paper that did or could possibly have become a ballot every election. And so if they print 1,000, if they take 1,000 blank ballot papers down to a vote center where an on-demand printer prints the ballot out as 800 people walk in from a variety of different precincts all over the county, and they end up saying, okay, we had 1,000 pieces of blank paper, we created 800 ballots, 22 were spoiled, and the voter came back and had to get a duplicate ballot. Here's the 22, 800 plus 22, we should have 178 blanks returned, and we returned 177. We were off one, or whatever it is. But this isn't a complete solution to all chain of custody issues, but I appreciate you bringing chain of custody up at this level of concern, Justin, because it is a big concern.
Does anybody else have any questions?
So a clarification of term, a lot of people seem to think blockchain means internet, right? I'm not talking about internet voting. I'm just talking about a digital log steps that a envelope or a ballot has been through, so that we actually can, have certified chain of custody.
I will jump in quickly, if you don't mind, and say blockchain voting, internet or not, is a terrible problem. And I'm happy to talk to you more another time about why You can contact me at benelo@microsoft.com or via other means. I'm easy to find. And I can tell you why, but among other reports, the National Academy had a report on elections in 2018. I was an author on that report, and we talk about blockchain voting and why it doesn't work. So, thank you.
It's incredible what we're working on
Got
here.
to the association, we got to the Attorney General's office with my lawyers, and they wrote a very powerful letter. And they updated the 1965 Act, and that now they've included ballot images must be preserved. There's a problem with it. They didn't give us a right to private action. The only people who could enforce this is the feds or the state. Our goal is to try to go ahead. We have contacts in the Democratic Attorney General's Association. We got Ken Bennett and other principal Republicans that we're working with, okay, to go after the Republican. And then this system, you know, I'm a strong believer, you can't keep something good unless you can give it away. That's knowledge and other things. Can you take that? Yeah. And so basically, we're going to go after the Attorney General's Association, and we're hoping to get them to understand how simple the system really is, that we're concerned about what's going to happen in November because we're heading toward a train wreck, okay?
Yeah.
And that we have to act. And the best thing we can do is to prove to people if elections are real or not on a simple system. And that's the goal. It's not going to be cheap. I'll be meeting with people to try to raise some really big money. I got election attorneys all over the country. I have been, in the last 6-7 years, worked in probably 25 states. I spent a lot of time on the road. And then I came back because of the virus. And then I just started all of this technology, Zoom, getting into meetings that way, organizing, speaking all over the country. So we got a decent following. What we do need to do is to get the monies that we need to support people like Emily Levy, who runs Scrutineers. She's one of the best. She's very good at training. I'm more good at causing good trouble. I'm a John Lewis kind of guy. And if I sue you, I want you to know we're going to be friends. And I'm suing you with a writ of mandamus. We disagree. What are we going to do? Go out to the Old West and shoot it out? No. I'm going to say, hey, we disagree. I'm going to pick an arbitrator. And in our system, I'm going to pick a judge, a court. And I'm going to ask the judge to say, gee, could you please have this person follow the law? She took an oath in the Constitution when she ran for office, the state and federal, okay? And she's destroying public records that could prove that elections are real. I think that's a sin to do that. And I want to be more like Mongolia. I'm sorry, okay? I don't know if I speak that language, but I do speak the language of that transparency is the solution, and it's the only thing that we can really got. The problems are complicated. This is a simple solution. And it took many years because I knew about digital way back as soon as Jim March came in. And we started talking, what is the future of voting? And we talked about digital. We tried to get Pima County to buy a digital scanner. Now, they ran the ballots. But of course, with Humboldt County, they were the first to do it. And so basically, it's not going to be easy. But what is easy in life? And what is worth really hard fighting for? My grandchildren. That's who I'm fighting for. And I'm fighting for yours in the future. My grandkids, when they go to college, they're going to get out of college with probably a $200,000 mortgage on their career. If they want to buy a house, gee, BlackRock is doing really good at buying a lot of houses and raising the prices. We're on a way to a real disaster. Our children are not going to have what we had. That's how I feel about it. So I'm committed. He's committed. And I know a number of people in this room are committed because you're here. Spread the word. And I would like to go to Emily Levy and give her the floor right now, because Scrutineers is a very important organization and for what they do. And I think the world of her. We used to work together, but you know, she decided to start her own thing, and I was hoping to do that because she's just really good and she needs to run her own group, and she is, and she's doing a great job. Emily, there you go.
Thank you. I wasn't expecting that, John. You all did a great job tonight. And I hope you'll come do the presentation in Scrutineers, because I think there's a lot of folks there who would really like to see what you presented tonight. And I want people to know come if you're looking for ways to get involved. That's our specialty at Scrutineers. Is anyway, if folks watching this are interested in finding ways that you can get involved in making our elections more transparent, secure, fair, and accessible, come check us out at scrutineers.org. And we have the next thing we have coming up is this Saturday. We have a training about how to take videos of poll tapes posted outside precincts on election night, which is one way of helping verify the initial vote count. So we've got information about that on the events page at our website. Come check it out. And I just want to say I'm really excited to see how this is developed. Ellen and I worked on this originally when I worked with Audit USA, worked on this program that has become Abe several years ago, and we weren't able to really put it to use back then. And so I'm glad to see the changes that have been made in it. It looks like it's advanced in some ways that are really useful. So thanks to Ellen Tyson and to John and Benny and everybody else who has worked on this.
Okay, we got you on the
Thanks.
screen.
I've been listening to a podcast called Midas Touch Network, and they've been having an organization called Democracy Docket online. I'm sure you're more maybe familiar with them. They're doing a lot of work with election procedures and gerrymandering in a lot of the different states. And so I was wondering if you are partnering, because they're actually looking at creating better election laws at the various state levels. I wonder, is that an organization that you work with? And then also with regard to disseminating the information publicly, I know like Midas Touch Network would be a good source. They have like a couple million viewers or something, but I was wondering also on the other side of the spectrum with Republican Newsmax or whatever, there's a lot of people that are really concerned with election integrity on both sides. So it seems like this would be a really good information to get out publicly. And I'm just wondering what efforts are being made in that regard.
Not enough. Okay. And if you can help us make those connections, please do, because it's going to take a team, is what it's going to take. We got one other person here.
I just had kind of an unusual idea. At what point does it get counted? Is the scanning of the image when it gets photographed at the same time as when it's counted?
Within megaseconds. No.
Almost.
The image, does it get counted first and then scanned in?
No.
And where's the hacking? Because I've seen people, say they can sit in a parking lot and hack an election that's going on inside the voting place.
Direct recording electronics.
So their numbers.
Anyway, thank you very much for everything you guys are doing. Thumbs
There are
up
a
for
number of ways,
transparency all over.
Okay. There are a number of ways this can happen, but essentially the process of the cast vote record, how it's created, is the paper is marked either by a ballot marking device or by hand marked paper. It's then placed through a scanner. The scanner takes a selfie, the paper drops into the bucket. The audit record for this image is then created. The serial number, there's a log that's created. This image sits because there is no Excel file at this point. Multiple people vote because the election is not over. It is against every law in every state to tabulate. So they're just held in this memory card for file. So then at the end of the election, they total and tabulate the preliminary summary totals. From that, the reason why and I said it in my presentation, that for the voter, the paper is the ballot. But for the computer, the image is its ballot. It then loops through all of those images and counts them and creates a single cast vote record per count. And that is an entire table that's created that becomes a cast vote record. It becomes John says a database, and they always give him flack for it, but technically it's a data table, so it could be considered a database.
On a flash drive of
some sort. Yeah, that's created in media, and then there are options to preserve those or discard those. And the reason why you can't discard them until the end or preserve them until the end is because you can't create the totals yet until the end. So you can't discard an image before the election ends, because how will you count it? You won't be able to count it if you discard it. So it goes all the way to the end, and then it's counted. The hacking that I want to say participated in, that I demonstrated was possible, I was looking at the central calculator. I was looking at, so each of these, like you can have a
Floating point arithmetic?
yes, that's correct. The box in the precinct has to be married to another box in another precinct, and another precinct, and that goes to a central tabulator. And those totals, precinct totals, are then aggregated further and then added with the ballots that came in by mail and the absentee ballots, and all of that is then aggregated, and then one big cast vote record is produced. So you still have to have the presence of those images at that point in time, because how will you get your large total? Because mind you, I have to keep track of that you were a mail-in ballot, that you were a early voter, that you were a poll voter at a precinct, and that's what the batches are for. The batching is keeping track of where you came from, and it's keeping them in batches so that it can aggregate and then create this cast vote record, which is why we are confident that using the cast vote record and using the images, assuming, to Jim's point, that that the election don't have no P in it, right? So as long as the election don't have P in it, then that record is hashed, and we can use that to start authenticating the count. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect.
One thing I just want to clarify,
Stephen,
when that paper goes into the machine, before it drops into the box, it does take the results, because if it doesn't, it will send it back. Okay.
Yeah, it creates an image of a record. It creates an audit.
Image, but it also reads it and puts it on a single.
Yes.
And that single is then imported into the database as a row. Okay. And so that only drops if it works. I've seen machines of people put a ballot in, and then they walk away, and I'm sitting there measuring the time, and another person comes who tries to stick it in there, and I go, my God, the ballot didn't go through. And you know why it didn't go through? The guy did a great job making beautiful check marks next to every oval. He voted every race, and he didn't hit one bubble. It stuck in the machine. And then they pulled it out and they go, what are we gonna do? And I go, oh my God, well, you can see his voter intent. Fill in the blanks.
There's another piece of this that needs to be mentioned, which is what happens to the paper ballot after it goes through the scanner. And what happens to the paper ballot after it goes through the scanner is it gets put in the order that it was scanned. It gets, it comes out like when you print out a 20-page document, page 1 to 20, and it gets put into a box and is stored in that order. And that box has a seal and a date on it. Mm-hmm. So therefore you can go back, and if you had to retrieve the original paper, it's not just this like haystack. There is some order. It may not be the most efficient libraries. There are some states and some counties that do it differently and make it more easily accessible. But that's the other piece of it that kind of closes the circle. Mm-hmm. And Susan's, I've written about audits as a journalist, since 2016. And a lot of people say that one method is the best and one method is the best and do this and do that. Well, you know what? If the methods were so great, we wouldn't have the big crisis of trust that we have right now. So let's just think about that. There's all the security and all this absence of trust. So what's missing? Well, this kind of a system is something that is missing. It hasn't had a wide enough road test. It's been road tested in some states. In Maryland's done it statewide since 2016. You don't hear about stolen elections in Maryland. It started in New York State, then it was shut down. Half the counties in Florida are doing it, but they don't want to make the images public. It's like a state by state thing. But the thing about it is there is a certain power in looking at something visually that you don't get when looking at a table of numbers. And so, it's not like this one system is better than another. They all have different strengths and weaknesses. But the technology today is not the technology that we had after Florida. And it's not the technology we had after Ohio in 2004. And it's not even the technology that was here in 2015. Because after the Russian hacking, everything went back to paper ballots. and the electronics and the digital, the way you can go upstream and trace problems is really, because of the advances in computing, it's really unprecedented. And most people don't know how it works. And most people don't explain how it works. But it's there. And that's why this isn't, but the thing I wanted to just start this with is we're talking about like how you have a screenshot and you can check it out and everything. But there's also an inventory process for the paper, and it's not lost. I mean, whether it's Marin County or whether it's, it's the same system that's that was on the screen in Maryland. It's used in Marin. It's made by Dominion.
And in Maricopa County.
Yeah, so where Ken is. And so anyway, I'm just saying that because it's not like this stuff is lost, but it takes a little bit of time, even though it is put away or handled in an orderly manner, to your. No, I was just gonna say, but that's how it's being used.
Yeah.
In the past, I mean, I read an article for the Washington Monthly. It came out last, magazine. It came out last December. There's a history of both candidates from both political parties who feel that they are trying to assess before an election is certified whether they are going to fight for a recount.
Yeah.
And they will go to the ballot images because what are they fighting for in a recount? They're going vote by vote to see if they can challenge voters' intent and subtract one or add one from their column. And they have gone to these ballot images and they have seen what there is or is not to fight over. Yeah. And that's happened it's happened in Florida, it's happened in Maryland, it's happened in Colorado, it's happened in a handful of other jurisdictions around the country. And those are the places that don't have these ugly nobody wants to lose, but if you're smart, you figure out like, well, I'm gonna spend all this extra money to fight over nothing. And that's another way these have been, and it's both Democrat and Republican, but it's not the mainstream of the election industry.
Yeah.
Am I saying that?
That's correct. I wanted to put that out there because there were a number of questions where I think it was Josh was saying, well, you should let me just inspect the ballots because I can't trust anything. I was, well, good luck with that. You don't have any standing. No judge is going to listen to you. The election officials, they're going to ignore you. You can't even get your public records request right. John has written so many public records, and you got to be a wordsmith to do a public records because if you're too broad or too specific, you're not gonna get a public record request answered. And John has become the wordsmith of it. So when he writes a public record, they just sue him. Damn, John, I'm gonna sue you.
Before I got sued in Santa Cruz County, I was in North Carolina. And all I had to do was show up and walk around the building, and they called the cops on me. They threatened me, they ticketed me. And they said, if you come back, you'll be automatically arrested. Wow. And so we filed a lawsuit. I did not become a plaintiff. I was with Lynn Bernstein, who's like a daughter to me. Okay. And she's Jewish, a little nice lady with 2 kids. And here I'm an aggravator from out of town, So I didn't get involved in the suit except for consulting. So I came back and I said, well, that was a strange thing in North Carolina. So I said, I don't want to do FEMA. I'm suing Maricopa. I've sued Maricopa 8 times and they're endorsing what we're doing over the last 20 years. Okay. And which is a nice thing because like I said, I don't sue you because I hate you. We're going to get along later. Okay. We disagreed. We're going to settle things, And so that's how I approach it. I'm the friendliest lawsuit you might ever get. But when I get in that courtroom, I'm tough. Outside, we'll talk about fishing and other things or whatever, because we got to keep working together. My grandchildren are counting on me for their futures, and yours are too. You have to think that way. Go ahead. And if you ever get my business card, because sometimes I have to remind people of this, it says on my business card, what I do is not about right or left, it's about right and wrong.
It's got a missed call.
And when I went into the fraud to work there with Ken, I was so brutally attacked on my fellow Democrats. I mean, they were I had death threats. I'm a traitor. Things I read, I just couldn't believe it. And I just can't make photocopies. And said, well, I'm not there as a Democrat. I'm there as a specialist in elections trying to protect the integrity of the process. And I exposed a lot because the bamboo story, bamboo paper, that was me.
Racist John.
Oh my God. Keith Overman got a hold of it. And he really laid me right out because he thought I was saying it. But the guy who took the film, a reporter, made 2 clips. And the second clip said, well, and I'm reporting this story because I don't believe any of it. Keith Overman thought it was me. And then the next thing you know, HBO is picking up on it. It was everywhere. And you know, people saying, don't you feel bad? No, because people are starting to realize, you know, and they finally caught on. And then a lot of friends that came in and defended me, went after Keith Overman. He never said he was sorry, but I'm not offended. You know, if you don't like the heat in the kitchen, you should get the hell out. Okay? This is how change is made. I believe in what Gandhi said.
Man,
What do they do? First they
down.
ignore you, then they laugh at you, and then they attack you. I'm being attacked, and I think it's an honor, and I wear it with pride. I really do.
And then you win.
Exactly the case. Yes, exactly the case. John, I'm out around the country. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to enlighten other activists. And I teach them the 7 C's. And what are my 7 C's? Character, capacity, credibility, civility. I call you nice bad names real nicely. Okay? Citizenship, country. But you know what the big C really is? Courage to stand up by yourself. Take a deep breath. And then remember, having an anxiety attack, I got adrenaline flowing my body. And be careful what you say, Brakey, because at the very end, the most important asset of the 7 C's is credibility. Credibility. And without credibility, what do I got? And so basically, I know it's getting late.
You just got some balance.
I want to
Say
thank
your
everybody
number
for being
again.
here.
520-539.
Yeah, 520-339.
339.
2696, and my email is real simple, johnbrakey@gmail.com. Brakey is Brakey. So other than that, anybody else?
Somebody just called you. Somebody coming from a 707. Somebody say you need some compassion for yourself.
We do?
Wendy.
Yeah, oh my goodness.
Shout out to Wendy
Go ahead.
for
I
compassion.
just want to say that it's very satisfying to make a difference in this area. And we may not be able to change all of the United States, but reducing the amount of violence that's going to happen in this next election, it's very satisfying to the heart. And I've been involved from 2003 to 2016. And then I took a break, but I'm back, and I just wanted to encourage you, whether it's energy or money or connections, that you can make a difference, and we can end up having a more peaceful election. I'm not sure it'll be thoroughly peaceful, but you can feel in your heart, I've done the best I can, and I've not sat by, even though I had suspicions that this was going to be really awful. So I just want to invite you and thank you right here, right now, for the time and energy you put into this.
Great meeting.
Yeah, and you know, I'm grateful that I live in Marin, but I found funny things even in Marin. So, you know, but the swing states, big issues, and we've got still electronic voting machines in Pennsylvania called Express Vote by ESNS, and also they're putting them in New York and South Carolina. So we've got plenty to do, and that's why I'm bringing in Lulu Friesdat, who's working against Express Vote in New York, and Pennsylvania is a real swing state, you know. So we've got to be looking at that. And then there's another film called Kill Chain, which I'm going to show, which is about foreign hackers coming in and entering the voting system. So yes, this paper record is so important, and we need to really pay attention. So I want to again thank you, and yay!
Wow, it was a long session. Thank you all for being here.
Amazing.
Yeah. Man, you ready to sit down, man. You ready to sit down. So funny. Racist. John's a racist. Who said that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, let's cut the